going to assume we are. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning.
I know it's Monday, and I know that daylight savings time ended, but good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you, thank you. I'm calling to order the Mayor Commission work session, November 7th. The time is 10:01. Commissioners Peduzzi and Warren will not be here, so we will go ahead and get started. Madam City Administrator, do you want to tee this up with the strategic plan update?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners, staff, and members of the public that are watching the work session. So our work session this morning is a focused discussion on the priority projects that were included in the update to the strategic plan. So just by way of what's going to be covered this morning, I've broken it up into two segments. Part one will be an overview of the session that the board held back in fiscal year 21, and then review the updates that were done to the plan. Again, the focus will be on the priority projects. And if I could, Mayor, what I would like to do is to go through all of the updates and then come back for the strategic discussion to make certain that the board gets an update on each priority project. And then I want to just do perhaps a brief, maybe review of some of the things that we have done internally within the organization. You know, if you examine the strategic plan, it is outward focused, and for the first time in the update, we included a pillar that takes a look at what we do internally as an organization. And I think given where we were a couple of years ago to where we are now, it's relevant to give the board some insight on some of the improvements that have been made. So by way of just an executive summary, we did an update session back in November of 2021. It was an update to the plan that was in place. The city has been engaging in a strategic plan since the early 1990s and have just continued to tweak it and build on it. So the November 2021 was an update to the existing plan. That session was facilitated by management partners, and there were several key updates to 4 of the elements within the plan. And those updates included to our vision, our mission, certain of the pillars, and then we also got to another element in terms of the priority projects. So as we begin to break down the updates to the key elements, our vision was updated to include and diverse. So it went to West Palm Beach being a vibrant and diverse world-class city. The mission was updated to include the underlying verbiage in partnership with our communities. West Palm Beach delivers exceptional customer service that enhances quality of life, embraces inclusion, and promotes opportunity for all. And we think that we are certainly hitting the mark in terms of reaching that aspirational vision for the city and certainly the day-to-day mission of how we carry out our services. So in terms of the strategic pillars that were updated, we started out with 7 and added 1, so we now have 8 strategic pillars. The updates were to the 3. We went from education, arts, and community, which is highlighted in the white, the right-hand side of the slide. It was updated to arts, neighborhoods, and community. Economic and jobs was updated to education, economy, and jobs. The other pillar that was updated, health and safety, was changed to public health and public safety. And then we added the 8th pillar, as I intimated, which is financial sustainability and organizational excellence. The plan at the time that we had the update session had 8 priority projects in it. 9 new priority projects were added in the November session. And as the board will recall, at the August 29th, 2022 work session, we talked about 2 priority projects that we were seeking clarification. Out of that discussion, the priority project that related to the revitalization plan for Okeechobee and Palm Beach Lakes was deleted by consensus of the board. That left us with 16 priority projects, which is among 5 of the strategic pillars. So just to kind of give you a graphic of where we stand with the 16 priority projects. As of the end of fiscal year 22, which was September 30th, 6 of the projects were completed, and the remaining 10 are in various stages of progress. And as I go through the presentation, the board will see where the green is highlighted for completion and then the gold for in progress. So when we look at the strategic pillars again, the board now has adopted 8 strategic pillars with the addition of financial sustainability and organizational excellence. But only 5 strategic pillars had priority projects. And while the other pillars did not have priority projects, I can assure the board that staff has been working on different projects related to the 2 pillars, or really 3 pillars, that did not get priority projects in the strategic plan. So the absence of a priority project for the 3 pillars certainly do not indicate that no work is being done in that area. So let's take a deeper look at the updates on the priority projects. Starting with Pillar 1, increasing the number of affordable workforce housing units by 20%. We use as the benchmark the data for 2021. That goal at that time was 500 affordable workforce housing units. Increasing it by 20% brought it to 600 units. As it stood at the end of fiscal year 22, 546 units were either completed and or underway. We project that another 100 plus or minus units are under pre-development right now, and we anticipate being able to meet that goal in fiscal year 23 of 600 units. That priority project is still in progress. Moving on to Pillar 2, development of the master plan for Broadway Avenue. By way of an update, strategic property acquisitions have been finalized for the scope of the Broadway mixed-use consultant. Those actions were finalized. The CRA partnered with ULI, or Urban Land Institute, to conduct a quarter analysis, and by the end of this fiscal year, we expect that the consultant will be identified who will develop and complete the master planning and rezoning process. In addition, funds were budgeted in FY23 for any related property acquisition. And as it relates to FDOT, given that Broadway is an FDOT road, that process is underway for redesign of the corridor from 45th Street to 25th, with preliminary engineering design work commencing in fiscal year 24. That project is still in progress. Moving on. Funding drainage and road improvements for Roosevelt Estates. And let me just highlight, the 2 asterisks indicates the projects that were added, so they will be part of the 8. By way of the update, in fiscal year 22, through approval of the board, $600,000 was invested for the 7th Street drainage swell improvements. And then in this year, $1.8 million has been budgeted for drainage improvements. We have $2 million for utilities and $2.1 million for road and sidewalks improvements that are also in fiscal year 23, which is an additional $4.1 million. The 7th Street swell grading has been completed. That drainage study is being conducted, and that will inform us of additional drainage work that needs to be done, and certainly that will come with funding that would be needed as we move through implementing that drainage study. The drainage study is projected to be completed in FY23, so that project is still in progress. Completing the Cora Park infrastructure improvements, and I hope that, Mayor, you and the Commissioner will recognize that quite a bit of these updates the Commission has been seeing as we've gone through a number of these actions. The Board approved the concept plan on June 27th of 2022. We received approximately $20 million in grant money. The construction is to commence by the end of the 2023 calendar year, with a completion projected to be in 2024-25. So that project is still in progress. As we move on to priority project number 5, improving the gateways into the community, with an emphasis on Forest Hill on the south end. By way of an update, we're finalizing the design for Parker Avenue improvements, which will provide multi-use trails on the east and west side, new pavement, street lighting, pedestrian safety improvements, as well as landscaping. The construction is tentatively scheduled to start the summer of 2023. And then also to highlight that in the 8111 South Dixie proposal that the board chose, it does include an enhanced south end gateway into our city. That project is still in progress. Funding the Seawall Master Plan. The staff have reapplied for the $175,000 Resilient Florida grant, which is one of the good things about that. There's no match requirement. I always get excited when I don't see a match requirement. We are awaiting a decision on the grant application. However, in addition to the grant, the CRA for this year has identified $200,000 to initiate the work on this effort, and we think the planning effort is probably going to be in the range of $500,000. That priority project is still in progress. Number 7, working with the schools and community-based organizations to develop technology, vocational education, and trade programs within our school system. Through the mayor's office, the initiation of coordination is underway with the school district, as well as a number of the community-based organizations to develop the post-secondary and career readiness programs. And this has to be done in partnership because obviously the school district takes the lead on programming for our school system. In addition to that, we are currently working on a marketing contract to study what the industry needs are post-COVID, because the world certainly has changed since we were introduced to COVID. Moving on, priority project number 8, creating a plan for redevelopment of South Dixie Highway Corridor. This was the other priority project that we got clarification back in the August work session. Given that clarification, staff has commenced a dialogue with FDOT to develop that plan to include pedestrian and safety crosswalk improvements. That plan will address also traffic calming and beautifications, and we hope to have that developed here sometime within this fiscal year. So that priority project is still in progress. And moving right along to the next one, development of the anchor site mixed-use development. The project plan was reviewed and improved to enhance the compatibility with Northwood Village. It is currently scheduled for the November 15, 2022 Planning Board meeting, so that's coming up on us. And it will allow the submittal of the building permit. The groundbreaking is expected by the end of this calendar year. That project is still in progress. Moving right along, development of our golf course site. That project is well underway. The greens are 90% completed, and some of you all probably have already kind of tested your golfing skills. The PGA Florida headquarter building is 80% completed, and it is anticipated that the public opening will be in early 2023. That project is in progress.
But we're working to hopefully get that into late February, early March
Yes,
of 2023, right?
Okay.
Mr.
at
Fong?
least for a public grand opening. Yes.
What a great idea.
Staff thought of that idea all by themselves. Moving right on to the next priority project, increasing the funding for the MWBE programs by 20%. It was actually increased by 22.5%, so just slightly over the goal. In dollars, that translates to $186,500, and then we have the breakdown of how that $186,500 actually was allocated. $150,000 for the loan program, and then the remainder of that for the software certification and implementation. Did want to just footnote, given that this project is completed, footnote that for fiscal year 23, there was consensus to allocate $500,000 from American Rescue Funds for loan programs, so the board will be seeing that come to you as that program is developed. That project is completed. Implementation of the disparity study recommendations. There were 6 recommendations. All of them, I'm happy to report, have been completed. Translation of our communication in various languages. Key information that we post on our website, is translated into Spanish and Haitian Creole, which are 2 of the dominant languages here within our city. We do have a contract with EKO4 for translation services. We have the ability to actually translate into about 72 different languages. I've highlighted some of the languages, and we translate into other languages that we have the availability or ability to do on an as-needed basis. That project is completed. Assessing and determining fire station staffing to achieve baseline coverage so that we have full coverage at all stations. Certainly the board has heard quite a bit of updates on this one because we're just overly excited that we were able to achieve completion of this project. The comprehensive assessment was done, which indicated that we needed an additional 15 firefighters, which were in this year's budget. And as the board is aware, this is to fully staff Station 8 with 13 new firefighters and then 2 for the community paramedic program. That project is completed. Moving right along, and this has been an issue that we continue to hear about, reducing speeding on Australian Avenue, North Lake, and Congress, three of the major thoroughfares within our city that have been plagued with speeding problems. Through the police effort, we had 14 special traffic enforcement details that have been conducted, and this is just rolled into among all 3 of the quarters. It's not broken out by each quarter. The special enforcement details were in addition to the regularly scheduled daily patrols, and because of that heightened enforcement among the 3 quarters, it has led to a reduction in serious bodily injury crashes between 33 and 50% on the reduction side, and traffic citations and warnings have also been reduced. However, we're not stopping there. For this fiscal year, 2 additional traffic enforcement officers are being added to that contingent to continue to make progress. That project has been completed. And moving on last but not least, increasing the police enforcement of vagrancy and panhandling. Just by way of calls, we had about 2,800 plus calls that were responded to compared to what we had in 2021, which was 3,165, and we've seen about a 10% decrease in the calls. So with that, Mayor, I'll pause here, and I will rewind, and if we want to go back through whatever strategic discussion you and the commission would like to engage in on the various projects, we can do so. The update highlights the key major actions that have been taken, but there is quite a bit of nuances and activity that relates to each project. So whatever level of discussion you all want to have, or if you have any questions, I'll turn it over to you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And first of all, thank you and staff for this update. Commissioners, I hope that you recognize, I believe, and I spent 8 years as a commissioner, this is probably the most in-depth update report that we've received on our strategic plan. It used to be the strategic plan, we'd have a meeting to discuss it, and we'd put it down, and then we wouldn't hear anything for the most part about it until the next year when we got back together. So I appreciate this periodic update on the strategic plan. It helps us as the policymakers to understand the progress we're making, and also gives us an opportunity to discuss whether something needs to be tweaked, whether more emphasis, less emphasis, et cetera. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. Commissioners, do you have any comments, questions at this point? And we'll obviously hear some more. Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you so much. I echo the mayor's comments that this is great to see, and I'm appreciative of this. And Administrator Johnson, in the beginning, you mentioned that many of these items we see and we vote on, we see it from the dais, and I would just ask that maybe it could be mentioned when we're voting on something that is one of these priority projects, that it just be mentioned during that presentation as well. I think that would be helpful to highlight that we are working on these items. Mayor, I don't know if you want to ask each number and we say if we have questions on that one so that we go in sequential order, or if you prefer that
No, I mean, I don't know if you were taking notes, but if you just want to, as part of your comments, reference any of them, and we could certainly advance the slide to reach that one.
Sure, I do have a couple questions. I don't know if there's any before number 5 that you have. Number 5 as well. Okay. Could you go to slide 5?
In priority project 5.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I'm just wondering if I could just get a little bit deeper update on it.
Okay, so for the Parker Avenue project, we've been working with FDOT in preparing the designs for that project. We've provided them with the 90% designs. We're going to get the last of their comments on that today, and then we will address those. And as the slide says, our anticipation is to get all that stuff resolved, put this thing out to bid, and hopefully start construction in the middle of next year. And you know, this is going to be a pretty large, very community-oriented project. We've been meeting with the Dreher Park Neighborhood Association and discussing all the nuances of the design, and I think we've got a pretty good relationship with them. And so it's a very collaborative effort, and I think when we're all finished with this project, it's going to be very well received by the community because of their input and because of the investment that the city's making in this section of the city. So I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. And do we see the Parker Avenue project as kind of the gateway, number one, because that's the first exit as you're coming north off of 95, and that Parker Avenue is close to the 95 exit? Is that how that was determined?
Well, yeah, I mean, it was originally part of the sales tax program to do some improvements on the very southern end of Parker Avenue from Forest Hill up to Suma Street. And then we applied for some FDOT grant money, and so we extended the project limits all the way up north to Nottingham, which is just south of Southern Boulevard. So, you know, it basically Parker ends at Forest Hill, and, you know, that's why it starts at Forest Hill Boulevard, which is an FDOT road. But, you know, it does pick up a very large area, a very widely traveled roadway that connects the south end of the city to the north end of the city and vice versa. So,
Mayor,
think
if I
it's a
could
very good
elaborate
project.
a little bit on the gateway. So, yeah, we have two really major gateways from south to north in the south end, Parker being one and South Dixie being the other. And so that's why those two are addressed here. You know, the more traditional gateway is probably South Dixie, but that's being addressed by the improvements at 8111 and the gateway art piece that's being done there as part of that project. But those are the two main arteries that go north and south that are east of 95.
Great, and I am grateful that this, talking about the gateway, was on a priority project because I think that helped lead to the discussions on the 8111 project, so thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Ward?
I just wanted to kind of touch on, because you were talking about South End, what's going on with the north end gateways. We've got a couple coming in, obviously, if you're heading south, and I'm sure my residents in my district want to know what's the status of, are we looking at them? Are we looking for funds? What's the idea for the north end?
Well, one of the pillars actually is the Broadway corridor, which is also should be considered as a gateway in the north end of the city. And just related to the roadway itself, we've been working with FDOT on that as well since the very beginning of this year. We did a major community engagement effort at the end of last year to salvage that project. We think that we have pretty much all of the buy-in that we need from FDOT on that section from 25th to 45th Street. They are going to actually proceed with doing the design themselves on that. Eventually, we're hoping that we're going to find out probably later on this month about where the construction funding is going to be set in the FDOT work program. And so the good news about it is that we think that FDOT's going to contribute significantly towards the whole design and the construction of that project, rather than the city having to make a large investment in that. The other part of Broadway is the section that's north of 45th Street, 45th to 59th Street, which we've also been engaging with them. They were going to do just a basic RRR, which is a resurfacing, rehabilitation, and a renovation project. And we asked if we could do similar improvements on that like we're trying to do on the section 45th to 25th with bicycle trails, additional pedestrian improvements, et cetera. And they were amenable to that. And so we're working through those details with FDOT to incorporate those into that next section of Broadway, which we know that the community has been very receptive to doing something there. And when we had the community engagement on the section between 45th and 25th last year with the community, they were asking a lot about that section north of 45th. And we told them that was going to be our phase 2, and we were planning on going forward with something there. And so that is in process as well. It's not nearly as far along, but it certainly has a lot of promise, and it's got some good legs to it right now that it's going to be progressing, probably a few years behind the southern section of it. But both those sections, all the way from 25th to 59th Street, are in the short-term, long-range plan, if I want to use those two together, to make some really serious improvements to that corridor that will help the city and the residents and the pedestrians and bicycles in coordination with the mixed-use district that the CRA has put in place there. So it's also a very good collaborative effort that we're working with the CRA and FDOT to advance that.
All right, thank you.
Okay?
Chris, you wanted to add on to that?
Yes, just that in addition to the street, the parcels specifically on the very north end of the city have been identified as part of our strategic land acquisitions, with the idea that we do create that nice entry gateway on the very north end. There's a lot of stakeholders around that entrance and that very north end of the city that are also equally interested that we've spoken to from the CRA. So we're already sort of laying the foundation for partnerships to really, once we get control of the properties that we think are necessary in addition to the road, we can really make some positive impacts so that you have that nice entry into the north end.
Follow up?
And what about the other gateway, like 45th? Are we thinking about that as far as the entryway from 95, just like we were talking about Parker?
Well, let me add one thing on 45th, because there was some investments made on 45th and Australian because there was city-owned property there as a kind of a gateway art piece, the Sunshine, I can't remember the name of it, but it's Sunshine something. But that was supposed to be a gateway sign kind of initiative. So on 45th and Australian, there was that investment was made there. I don't know if there's any other plans for 45th.
Well, actually, 45th Street is a county road, and they have a project that's in the works that they're going to do some widening on a section of that. And they asked us to invest in additional street lighting on that section of 45th Street where they're going to be doing the widening. But it's really, it's up to the county to decide what it is that they want to do there. But they do have this project that's in the works that's going to happen in the next few years to do the widening there. And we also are going to improve the street lighting on 45th Street, the section that's actually within the city limits. And so that's the only thing I really could elaborate on as far as the 45th Street as a gateway project, so.
All right, any other questions, comments, commissioners? Let me see if anybody else has anything. Commissioner Lambert, before we move on. President Fox? Okay, Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. Item number 6, the seawall planning. Certainly I'm grateful that we're finding funds for the planning process. I'm curious if we are imagining that in the planning process, there will also be vision for funding for the future. And I mean, I know that that's the idea, is that we're going to plan, but I would imagine there's some short-term activities that we can do that will be of more reasonable costs, and then I imagine there are some long-term activities that will take a tremendous amount of planning and saving or grant writing.
So Commissioner Armando Fana, Assistant City Administrator. So as the City Administrator said, there is some nuances in this. So in this particular strategic pillar or plan, we have some grant funds already for a pilot project along Flagler to help with seawall. We're waiting for the grant agreement to come to us to finalize that. We've identified grant matching funds for that. So that's already been awarded. So that pilot will help in determining how we move forward maybe with the design and allow us to have some ideas on how to move forward the design. And once we get the design in place, that's when you can really begin to go after the additional funding. When we anticipate there's going to be a lot of money available in the next few years through the infrastructure funds. We now have a grant administrator who's helping with this process. We have staff that's been constantly discussing, meeting regularly, and the seawall is one of the main things that we've identified that we need to have on the table in terms of applications when funding comes available. So I would anticipate in the next 2 to 3 years, once we have the planning done, we will be going after significant funding for the seawall.
Great, thank you.
Any
Mayor, if I
other-
could add on to that for just a
Yes.
second. And we do speak regularly with
You-
I'm
and
sorry,
everybody
Kimberly
who speaks,
Rothenberg.
This is being taped, so I need you to identify who you are when you hit the mic. Thank
Kimberly
you.
Rothenberg, City Attorney. Just to let you know that we routinely talk with our federal team specifically as to money like the Build Grant and other large pot sources of money that are available. But in those conversations, the first part is, in fact, the planning, because we have to have the plan together to have a really good understanding of, number one, what needs to be done, what can we do, and plan for the design, and then know what our request would be. And we are positioning ourselves in that manner as well.
Thank you. Other questions? Did you have some more on your list?
I do, thank you. Item number 7, I'm pleased to see that this is in progress. I was just curious, who is the staff lead or the department that's leading this?
It is under the mayor's office, being led by the Chief of Staff, Economic Development Director.
Great, thank you. And then item number 13.
Wait,
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just going to that, so for purposes, because Chief of Staff, you're pretty busy with everything that goes into being a Chief of Staff, but, you know, now that I'm on the committee when it comes to, like, our education piece, I'm noticing there isn't somebody other than you that is a staff, someone to, like, you know, right now, my commission aide is taking notes and things like that. Do you foresee a change in that, or, I mean, how deeply am I supposed to be working with you, given your main role? So I just have more questions on that.
Sure. Mayor, City Administrator, are you speaking to the advisory committee? Oh, excellent, okay. So Rebecca De La Rosa, Economic Development Director and Chief of Staff. Since coming on as Chief of Staff and Economic Development Director, the mayor and I have worked very closely with Chair Bades with Palm Beach Atlantic, and she has come on in the last year pursuing a plan that would be produced to the mayor for review. And in addition to that, she and the team, the committee, has been directed to participate in the mayor's elementary education program. So thankfully, we've been able to model a program after a very successful program in Wellington, and we've begun producing monies and funds to each elementary school within the city of West Palm Beach. So if there are additional questions you have pertaining to the advisory committee, the participation of the elementary education program, and then also our participation and involvement with Roosevelt properties, we're happy to answer those for you.
With respect to staffing, I have asked for in previous years and have asked in this year for a plan of work from that committee to see what it is they would like to do. Once I receive that, then I could talk more internally as to how we can provide staff to help with the implementation. To date, I've not seen the plan of work. The monies that we've taken out of the general fund for the first time in my memory to help fund educational initiatives, that was something that I came up with. So if you're working with them, you can remind them that I'd love to see some kind of plan of work for what they're looking to do in the next year, so then we can start talking about staffing needs.
Okay, I just know I'm obviously new, and so being on other committees, there's usually somebody at a staff level on the other committees who are helping drive those work plans and helping drive the agendas. I work with Chris Rugg at the CRA, so, you know, Housing Authority, same thing, there's a staffer, and so I'm just hoping that there is a continuous connection, because yes, it's a volunteer committee, and yes, they would want to, you know, develop a work plan, but it's got to be somebody also on the city side, I think, that's helping drive that work plan as well to fruition.
But it is a citizen volunteer committee, all right? So it's not to be the staff is directing the group of volunteers.
No, I meant like they help, like saying, like, you know, Chris helps with the crab board and developing and moving the agenda forward and getting it out there, and so I've just noticed this on other committees, and I didn't notice it on this one, so I just wanted to know if we're heading in that direction, or if that's not gonna happen, just because I haven't had that conversation.
No problem. Just one last comment. It is upon the request of the chair that I attend, and most recently I've attended at least two, giving a little bit more information on our involvement with Roosevelt Elementary and then also with the Mayor's Education Elementary Program. So I'm happy to participate and give additional updates.
Okay, any other questions, comments, Commissioner Lambert?
I do have a follow-up to that. Mayor, so when you mentioned that the Education Committee is a community, I think, voluntary committee, is that different than our other city committees, or is that just the general description of all of our city committees that have volunteers on them?
Well, some are more formalized than others. CRAB is a much more formalized committee. This one is a group of, and I think it was formed by my predecessor, of folks who have an interest in education in the city, who have been convened or brought together to make recommendations or even to come up with plans of action. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of the direction.
Okay, I know that's not the agenda item today, so I'll move on, but thank you for that information. Appreciate this item. The next one I have is project number 13. And I'm appreciative of this effort to help make things available in other languages. I think that that's very helpful. I was just curious, I know I've seen our Spanish language Facebook page and other social media efforts. I was just curious, are there other efforts that we're making to let people know who speak these other languages know that this is available?
I'm going to turn it over to the interim Director of Communications.
Good morning, everyone. Larry Gans, Interim Director of Communications. This project was to take down those hurdles because we're relatively adept at translating things into Spanish and Creole. But one of the things you found out, and I have to thank Kim Bolton, because by the time Administrator Rodriguez told me about the project, she had kind of had it in a position where when I took over, I could pretty much pull it into the station. And found out that, for example, talked to Palm Beach County Schools, there's 120 languages spoken in Palm Beach County Schools. So this allows us in the 72 main languages to put out any communications that we need to, and it is the most widely professional translation service used by governments in Florida. And so then we drilled down and tried to see in the census data of what languages were most often spoken at home in West Palm Beach. And they're Indo-European languages, and then you get into Asian Pacific, and then you get into Sub-Saharan Africa. For example, one of them is Hindi and Urdu, and then you get into Mandarin. But the advantage we have as a city is that most of those populations are very fluent in English already, including written English, Ukrainian, Russian. But what we can do is on our website, when you bring up our website, for example, the browser can translate it into the language that you need. But for printed materials, this allows us to do that and to do it relatively quickly for any emergency thing that we have, so we don't just assume that everybody's either English, Spanish, or Creole. And since we got the project done, what I've done is I've expanded it to include community engagement, and then figured out that with all the languages most spoken in schools, it may be of some use to the library too, if we have to.
Wonderful, thank you.
President Fox.
Thank you. I just have a question about that as well. We had a call recently to our office, someone that spoke Spanish and was having trouble with some of the forms that needed to be filled out for Parks and Rec, for example. So in this point that says material translated as needed, is that a situation where someone can just ask something else to be translated and we can get in touch with you, or how would that work?
Yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay, great, thanks.
Next one's 15. I don't know if you have something before that.
15, please. So when you said it's completed, what, next one over, 15, sorry. What constitutes completed?
Whether or not we have met the target in terms of reducing speeding, and just, based on the number of special details that were added and the measures, being the reduction in traffic citations and warnings, we've considered in terms of this, project, that specific project as completed. But as I also intimated, we're not stopping there. We're continuing to build on that by adding traffic enforcement officers. But certainly that is a discussion for you and the mayor to have if, there's no hard stop to the reduction of speeding, within those three major thoroughfares. And I certainly will allow Chief Adderley to add any footnotes to this. We recognize that speeding is, an ongoing challenge and issue, but in terms of the specific, project, that's how we're measuring whether it's completed or in progress.
And again, keep in mind the context of this discussion. This is something that was discussed, set forth as priorities in the last strategic planning session. Mm-hmm. We'll get together again as commissioners and staff and mayor to tweak, adjust, modify if there are continued need for priority, then maybe we'll put that in. But there are other streets as well. As I've been out and about, I mean, people were saying that speeding is horrible on Forest Hill, for example. And so, again, this is kind of giving an update on the strategic plan we had adopted to date. Does not mean it's the final one. We get together every year to modify and further analyze the strategic plan, but that's the context of this particular discussion, is an update on the plan that has been adopted, so we all know what progress has been made.
Thank you for that clarification. I was just like, you know, was it the 50% decrease? Is it the number of traffic citations you guys are continuously hitting? Was it adding the 2 additional traffic enforcement? And so, because, I mean, you've been at the police meetings, like, we're constantly bombarded with speeding on Australians, speeding on Congress. And so I just didn't know if there was a specific data measuring point that you guys had identified in this goal to say, okay, this is what constitutes completed.
Yeah, but I think when you look at the complaints themselves, I mean, it's coming from the residents, and they're not the people that's really being cited. So you got people that don't live in the city that's being cited, and it's hard to change that type of, have some type of positive change when we're conducting enforcement on that particular group. I think if we were citing residents that actually live in that area, you'll see a big notable change when it comes to the complaints, because, you know, you cite like about 4 or 5 of them and the complaints go away. So, but this is different. I mean, even you look at, like, say, Congress, I mean, you know, you got from like the Outlet Mall going north to 45th Street. I mean, there's no like traffic calming device. That's one of the things that we're working with traffic to try to look at, to kind of evaluate here. Do we need more lights, traffic lights there in that area? I mean, we can go out, we can write hundreds of tickets a day, but if you're citing people that's not really stakeholders in the area, those problems are going to continue. We're going to continue to get the complaints. The data makes it looks like we have a success, but are the complaints going to go away? Probably not, because, you know, the people, it's not really affecting the people, it's affecting the quality of life for the people that live there, but the people that are being cited are not the ones that are actually living in the neighborhoods.
Further questions, comments on this section? Commissioner Lambert?
No, I have 16.
Okay. Number 16.
Thank you. I'm pleased to see these numbers. Thank you so much. I know that efforts have been increased to help this part of our community. I was just curious, because most of the others had key actions taken. I was just curious if we could have a report on some of those key actions that helped to get us to this.
I would say that, you know, you look at the number itself as a whole, it looks like we're making some progress here. I think that when you look at, again, the perception and the people that actually see this on a daily basis, the business owners, the residents in the area, I mean, it's looked bad from a perception, from their perception. They'd say that the problem is a lot worse than it really is. You look at the numbers different. I believe that, you know, we got some things that we're trying to work with in the future that's going to probably make a bigger impact so that we can make a notable positive changes, but I think it's kind of premature for us to talk about it now until we actually come back with a plan. But one of the things I think is, you know, we kind of limited is some of these enforcement efforts. I mean, a lot of people think that, you know, we're going to arrest our way out of this problem. I don't think that's going to happen. I do believe, you know, our partnership here with housing and working together and with the social services here in the city is going to definitely help us make a positive change. And as long as those relationships continue, I think we're going to see these type of results. But still, again, I mean, it's going to take a lot of people at the table to make this thing happen.
Mayor, can I add something to this conversation? So, Armando Fon, Assistant City Administrator. Commissioner, if you recall, one of the, and I think it's important to point this out, when this strategic pillar was established, or this particular goal, we had a panhandling ban on downtown and Northwood. We had to overturn that ordinance because of court decisions that were made in this district, I believe. Kimberly, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So I just want to point out, as the chief said, there are limitations on enforcement, law enforcement on some of these issues, and in particular in panhandling.
Mayor, may I?
Yes.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much for that update, because maybe in the future, as the mayor mentioned, that when we revisit this, maybe the priority project isn't increasing police enforcement, but maybe it's some more nuanced or holistic approach to how we're handling this. Because I just did the math, and 2,839 calls, I presume that's in 1 year. That's still 7.5 calls on average a day. That seems like a lot.
We do. We have a lot of calls.
And again, this does not address all that we're doing to deal with homelessness in our city. It's very specific to the complaints about panhandling and vacancy. So I don't want that to be conflated into this is all we're doing on the homelessness front. We have a very comprehensive strategy, which we could certainly share with you commissioners at another time. But this is pinpointing just on the vacancy and panhandling calls. All right, what else do we have? Commissioners, any other questions? All right, Ms. Johnson, what's the next phase of the presentation?
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioners, I'm going to move on to part two and just kind of have a high-level overview discussion with the board, on looking.
By the way, let me compliment you on your PowerPoint game. If you had lessons from Mr. Green, this is impressive.
All of the credit for my PowerPoint goes to two staff members. One is Mr. Rodriguez, Assistant City Administrator, and my Executive Assistant,
Okay, all right.
Shona Smith. So I believe in giving credit where it's due, but thank you for pointing that out, Mayor. So as we take kind of a high-level look at certain aspects of the significance, of Pillar 8, I think this is probably the one that I was most excited about it being included within the strategic plan. As I indicated, all of the other pillars look outward in terms of the quality of life within our city and how we're providing that. But as an organization, I think it's equally important that we look at ourselves. So while the strategic plan doesn't codify a vision for the city as an organization, beginning in February of 2020, based on discussion with the mayor and some of the feedback we've been hearing intermittently from commissioners, we've codified a vision for our organization, and that is, we want to be a world-class organization committed to excellence. One of the hallmark characteristics of a world-class organization is operational excellence. So in identifying challenges to getting there, although we have a very, very talented workforce, I want to start out by indicating that. Taking a look back to where we were in February 2020, coming through some major kind of issues that don't need to be articulated. I think everyone is painfully aware of where we stood at the end of the calendar year 2019. We identified several gaps that we had systemically and perhaps in different areas of our operations that were challenges to becoming that world-class organizations. And they are listed here, and they sort of cut across the gamut, if you will. So in having identified those gaps or challenges, from an administrative standpoint, it certainly was a recognition that we needed a culture shift in our organization. We couldn't continue to operate in the manner that we were operating, pretty much out of sync with best practices as a government entity. We needed to close the operational gaps And with the understanding that that doesn't happen through osmosis, it requires work. If you have, for an example, an ethical gap within the organization, we have to work on closing that and not just think that we can sit by on the sideline and somehow the organization will become ethically operated. And so we did some things from a policy standpoint in addition to discussions about where we were at that time. Another shift we needed to make was the understanding that performance excellence needed to be at every level of the organization, whether we're looking from the top down or from the bottom up. Each staff person in their respective position certainly can excel at the job that he or she performs, and every job within the city contributes to our organization being world-class, and it certainly contributes to the kind of service that we deliver. And another point of emphasis is that excellence must be a habit. It must become who we are and how we perform, and not that we want to just be excellent when we're working on one project and then we slide back on another one. We want to define our organization, as operating in excellence. So we laid out a couple of leadership expectations, given that the department directors, as well as the administrators, sit in the seat of having to ensure certain things. One of them is stand on top of our policy, procedures, and processes. That's our operating infrastructure, and we need to make certain that we are complying with it. And where we have looked at having to identify the need for changes, we allow directors, if they have feedback on suggested changes that need to be made, that gets filtered up to administration, we vet it, and then we put it into policy. One of the challenges that we had in a number of regards is that we were operating on practices. Practices kind of gives you that option, well, I'm going to operate this way today, and then I'm going to operate a different way tomorrow. So where it's effective or policies and procedures, we want to put it into policy and procedure and just not practice, because practice could be handed down from behaviors that we don't want to continue within the organization. And then also encourage the department leadership to do quality controls, to make certain that within their departments that we are ensuring and following the policy, procedures, and processes that we have in place. And it whether it relates to how we develop our agendas, with contracts, time cards, travel requests, and there are a number of things that the 3 Ps guide within the organization. And then the last leadership expectation was identifying barriers to maintaining the compliance and closing the operating gaps. There may be particular reasons why certain things were not being followed. We needed to know that and then develop an action plan on how we can rectify that situation. So in terms of the significance of Pillar 8, financial sustainability and organizational excellence, just want to kind of highlight some of the challenges that we dealt with from 2019 up into even today if we have them, but these are some of the threshold actions that we had to rectify. Ending the legacy adverse budget practices that we had going on here within our organization. And that's probably one of the areas where we have done the biggest lift and have spent more time making certain that we rectify the budget situation. As an organization, we can't operate where we have this historical legacy imbalance between our expenditures and revenues. That kept us in a position where with each budget process, we were starting out behind the 8 ball, and it made it just incredibly challenging trying to balance a budget when out the gate, regardless of the development and the increase in tax base that we were seeing, we were already behind because we were overshooting our expenditures by $4 million than the revenues we were bringing in. So that was a critical one that we had to just look and stare in the face and get a handle on. we discontinued spending ad valorem tax revenue. This was a practice where, because of the development that was going on, we were projecting we were going to have this increase in tax revenue, and so we started just bringing in items into the budget that would have an impact on the operating budget in the next year without keeping track of how that was going to reduce what we bought in. I put the asterisk there because in certain circumstances that may be necessary, but that shouldn't be the practice. That should be the exception where there is something that is a priority that we have to fund out of one-time dollars that become an operating hit on the budget. But that's by exception, not by rule, and we were doing that too much on the rule side, so we had to get that situation in order. Eliminating ongoing bank fees, and, because we had incorrect bank accounts for depositing checks, and then eliminating the cost of cutting hard checks. And looking at our financial situation, kind of just doing an analysis of where we were. Banking fees, while it was not big dollar amounts, but it was like we were cutting into our finances, that old saying by, death by 1,000 cuts. The fees that we were being charged for incorrect bank accounts when we deposit checks is a nominal fee, but in 2007, the city made the decision that we were going to do away with hard checks and everyone be on direct deposit. We had about 25 employees back in 2020 who were still getting hard checks because for whatever reason, they didn't sign up for direct deposit. In other cases, their bank account numbers had changed. They had closed out one account that their check deposit was going into another, and then their paycheck would get deposited into the wrong account. For the bank to sort all of that out, that was a fee to the city. And so that is an area that we didn't have to continue to incur a cost. But if you look at a nominal cost over a 13-year period for 20 or 25, if that's the average number of employees, those little costs begin to add up. And it's the same with our personal bank account. We don't want to pay the bank fees for something unnecessarily. In fact, we probably don't want to pay the bank fees for anything, but there's a cost of doing business. So that was the low-hanging fruit that we changed to help increase the financial stability of the city. And then again, the cost for cutting hard checks. There's a cost that comes with that. We've eliminated that as well. We've discontinued this practice that we had of making funding commitments where the funds were not available. Just as a general rule, that is a practice that should not be adopted within an organization. And then we modified the employee hurricane assignment practice. We had some situations where when we activated employees out of an urgency to help, would show up. But you have to have an assigned task when it comes to hurricane, because once you're there and you're engaged and you don't have an assigned task, you become an expense on the operating payroll. So as we move forward along the same theme of organizational excellence, some of the improvements we made, and these are just a couple of highlights. We have implemented iCompass software to replace the outdated agenda software under Lotus. In Lotus, I'm dating myself, my first tour of duty here at the city back in the mid-'80s, we were using Lotus for the agenda process. And I can tell you that no technology stays in place over a 30-year period. And so it made the agenda process very, very onerous. Oftentimes, we would have to have the agenda coordinator staying late, putting her on overtime to produce the agenda under Lotus because the system was so broken and a lot of manual effort had to go into developing an agenda. And we have rectified that with iCompass. It's a much user-friendly system. It has a lot of features that Lotus didn't have. And so we're glad to not have to have staff work overtime to put an agenda together. Additionally, we updated or created over 25 new policies to help with the operating infrastructure here within the city. And then moving on, and this is another key area, to make certain that when items are approved by the board, that they make it into the operating budget. And I'll just highlight two examples where this didn't happen, and it caused quite a bit of consternation for the organization. Back in fiscal year 19, the board approved, and the item actually went to the board for formal vote via a resolution, $65,000 for the Pioneer Memorial Park. When they came to develop the agreement to move that project forward, it was not in the budget, and we happened to be in a budget constraint period. So it was a challenge finding that. They were very good about working with us until we can get it in the budget. And then when we look at the situation that occurred in fiscal year 20, where the board was under the impression that we were getting 9 new firefighters that did not make it into the budget, and we don't want the organization put in that situation. Certainly, we don't want to have the mayor and commission in a situation where positions you approve or expected to be in the budget, lo and behold, do not make it into the budget. So as we then look at how financial sustainability and organization excellence, where does it come into play in this strategic plan? And that's within our values. So we have a vision for our city, our community. We want it to be a vibrant and diverse world-class city, and we think we're hitting the mark there. And then on the other side, the administration's vision of building a world-class organization that's committed to excellence. The values in terms of what we believe and how we perform, how we carry out providing public service, which is our business, those connect with both ends of the spectrum from a vision standpoint. So as we have worked over these last fiscal years, several fiscal years, it has taken an all hands on deck to move our organization closer to becoming that of a world-class organization. And I think we have made just tremendous headway on actually making that happen. But that doesn't happen just with one person. I want to thank our staff, Team WPB, because everyone has committed to moving us in that direction. Certainly the commissioners, you all have played a vital role as we have brought different initiatives to the board, certainly through the budget process, and then certainly under the leadership of the mayor. You know, we are certainly becoming, and we're building that world-class organization in terms of our commitment to excellence in serving our residents, stakeholders, and visitors within our city. And with that, Mayor, that ends my presentation.
All right, thank you. And let me publicly thank you, Ms. Johnson, for undertaking that initiative. Commissioners, where you sit, and I've sat there, you don't really see what's kind of going on behind the scenes. But Ms. Johnson is absolutely correct. I mean, you could have the prettiest car from the outside, but if the engine and transmission are mucked up, it's not going to be of any value to you. And that's kind of where we were as an organization when I stepped in as mayor. I have told staff that in the early years of my administration, I felt like the guy who followed the elephant in the circus. We had to clean up a lot of, let you finish that sentence. But anyway, nobody laughed at that? That was pretty good, actually. All right, it'll hit you tomorrow. Under Ms. Johnson's leadership to inject a higher level of professionalism in our organization, it is not seen from the outside, but it is certainly appreciated. I, as the CEO of the city, certainly appreciate it, and it helps our organization run more efficiently, more professionally, more ethically. and commissioners, we want to make this an organization for which you will be proud to serve as the legislative body of. We don't want you in any way to be embarrassed by the operations of the administration. That doesn't reflect well on us and wouldn't reflect well on you. So I just want to publicly thank you, Ms. Johnson, for leading this effort. It continues to be ongoing, just like with our strategic plan. We are continuing to try to be better. It is a journey that we probably will never reach the end of, but each and every day we want to be better than we were the day before. So thank you, Ms. Johnson.
Thank
Any
you, Mayor.
questions?
Before if I could,
Yes.
before the commissioner make any comments that they may have, I do want to, I went right past this one, but this is an important one to pause on. In terms of addressing outstanding audit findings, and to just put this into context and try to wrap your mind around it. We had 140 open audit findings that dated back to 2014. And as a world-class organization, it's critically important that you have a compliant organization. Internal auditor, that function helps us to identify areas within the operation that can be strengthened, that can be improved, and to have 140 audit findings that date that far back that were still unaddressed, was astounding. We have made significant headway on bringing those 140 audit findings into compliance. It has been an ongoing effort over the last almost 3 fiscal years that we have been working on behind the scenes. The majority of those, the departments have now complied with. There's a process that the internal auditor goes through in terms of reviewing the information and then complying it on her end and taking them off the books. But the 140, the vast majority of those have now been brought into compliance. To just underscore how important it is that we rectify any audit findings, there is a process in place whereby when we have internal audit findings, our external auditor then reviews those. And if there are financial audit findings that have just not been addressed, the external auditor sends them up to the State Joint Legislative Auditing Committee. In fiscal year 20, we got a letter from the chair of that committee to the mayor informing him that the city had 4 repeat audit findings from years past that had not been addressed, and that the committee, as part of their duties, wanted the city or was requesting the city to take corrective action, and if not, then for the mayor or me as the city administrator on the mayor's behalf, appear before them to provide an explanation. And that's not a situation that we want our city to be in. Audit findings should never rise to the level where they are unaddressed, neglected, that it then gets on the radar of your State Joint Legislative Auditing Committee. And I'm pleased to say that we have since complied with those audit findings and are no longer getting the letter from the chair of that committee. The last one, we had the Inspector General who did an audit of our travel back in 2019. There were 31 open items from that had not been addressed, and so we began to work on those. Those audit findings were on travel, certain things were not allowed to be paid by the city, and the vast majority of them probably was in error, that they were expense to the city. We sent letters to the impacted individuals to recoup that money, and in total, we recouped about just under $1 million that was repaid and put back into the city coffers, and then we updated the travel policy to make certain that we did away with the inappropriate practices. So that's just one impact from an audit finding standpoint that ties into organization excellence as well as financial sustainability. but the number of outstanding audit findings was just astounding that as an organization, we still had not addressed. And we are in a compliant position as we speak this morning.
Hence the reference to the guy following the elephant in the circus. Okay, commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Lambert?
Just a comment. I just want to say thank you to administration, to you, Mayor, because operational excellence leads to appreciation from our employees, leads to better recruitment and retention, which then in turn leads to better service for our constituents, for our residents and stakeholders. So I know how important that piece is, which is why it was the middle puzzle piece there. And, you know, I know we didn't go into detail of all 16 of the pillar or the priority projects that you updated on, but I just wanted to say thank you to the staff who came here today and who work on them every day. One of my favorite sayings in work is what's measured gets done. And so by having these kinds of pieces that hold us accountable, I think it helps move the city forward. And I just want to say thank you because I know it is not easy work.
Thank you, Commissioner, for saying that. Anything else, commissioners? All right, again, thank you, Ms. Johnson, for that presentation. Under Mayor's Matters, while we're on the strategic plan, Ms. Johnson, you'll start working on scheduling our strategic planning session for 2023. And
Yes, sir.
get that on everyone's calendar as soon as possible. I don't have anything else. I do want to, and Mr. Fana alluded to it, I think Ms. Johnson alluded to it. I have hired, reporting directly to me, and I think we've introduced Ann Rosenthal to you all, who is our grants guru. She's got a fancy title. What are we calling it? Strategist, yes. I knew it was, it sounded better than guru. But anyway, Ann is our grant strategist, and it was important to me, and I've mentioned this before, that with all of the monies that are set aside up in D.C., whether it's infrastructure, for capital improvement plans, et cetera, I thought it was important that the city have a full-time employee whose job is to bird dog those dollars, understand what our priorities were, including seawall, obviously, here as a city, and then to do a match so that we didn't miss any funding opportunities. And she's been doing a yeoman's job. So thank you, Ann, publicly, because that's going to really help us as a city to capture some of those monies flowing down. I don't have anything else on the Mayor's Matters. Anything else for the good of the body? President Fox?
Thank you. It looks like we might have some significant weather issues later this week. I'm just wondering if there's any updates that we should know about.
I received a text that we are currently under a hurricane watch, not a warning, and I know there was a conference call at 10:30. So as soon as we have information, we will share it with you, commissioners. But yeah, it's going to be messy over the next couple of days. Anything else? Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. On another topic, but given that we anticipate this messy weather, tomorrow is a very important election day. And I wanted to ask my fellow commissioners and parking administration if you all were in agreement that we could offer up our commission parking spots to people who want to come and vote tomorrow, and that if administration or maybe our commission staff could help us to make signs on those parking spots that say, available for voting today only, if you all were in agreement to that.
Well, I'll let your fellow commissioners speak first.
I think it's a great idea. They had, yesterday at Howard Park, that's how they had it. The first few parking spots had an orange cone that said for voters only.
So the nodding
As
head
long as our
says you're in
parking
agreement.
admin is okay, I'm okay with it. As long as no one gets ticketed. Yeah.
No, I think that we had arranged to have free parking for voting on, Mr. Fonda, do you want to address that?
Yes, so for tomorrow, we have free parking at the City Center Garage from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., as well as we're putting information out there through the DDA and the city as well on circuit vehicles, providing rides to and from the two polling places in downtown. So that's been distributed over the weekend and will be so in the next 24 hours. Mayor, if you're okay with that, we can certainly cover up those parking signs that are for the commissioners and put something up there that's for voting.
No, I think it's a great idea. Thank you, Commissioner Lambert. And the reference to circuit is because they have changed some of the polling places, and so some people may come here thinking that this is their poll and find out that it is up at Dreyfus. And so we have worked out a deal with Circuit that they'll be shuttling people from here up to Dreyfus to vote, so that the lack of transportation or the distance won't be an impediment of them to vote. And we're getting the word out there through social media and other means to let folks know that service is available. And we will also advertise the fact that parking is free on Election Day. Anything else for the good of the body? Somebody tell me what these are here. Each of us got, this is an example of the language translation.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's, each of your profiles are in French and German.
Okay. Let the record reflect that I, as mayor, under the French one, I'm Burgermeister. I'm not sure that's the correct interpretation. I do like a good burger every now and then, but I don't know if I'm a Burgermeister. Anyway, we digress. Okay, if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much.